Good morning, everyone. Bom dia. I'm Patricia Lourenço, and today I'm representing the Portuguese National Youth Council. It is with great pleasure that we begin the opening session of the launch of the OECD Youth Policy Toolkit. This session is being held in person here at Tec Maia in Maia, Portugal, and is also being broadcast to participants in various parts of the world. We thank you all for joining us today. The toolkit we are presenting today is an essential resource to support policymakers in implementing effective and inclusive strategies for young people. This guide brings together best practices from 38 OECD member countries, covering key areas such as education, employment, social inclusion, civic participation, and public governance. This session will feature opening remarks from high-level representatives, a detailed presentation of the toolkit by the OECD team, and a roundtable with experts and youth representatives. We invite all participants to follow along and get involved in the interactive discussions of the breakout sessions later today. To officially open this event, I invite our illustrious speakers to share their opening words. I would now like to invite Mr. Hernani Ribeiro, Council Member of Maia Municipality, to take the floor.
Well, good morning, everybody. Dear attendees, I would like to begin by welcoming everybody and wishing that this will be a truly enrichment moment for us all. It is with great honor that Maia City Council welcomes this initiative focused on the future, on the project A Better Future for Youth in Aging Societies. At a time when we face significant demographic challenges, it is essential to build bridges between generations and ensure concrete opportunities for our young people. This OECD toolkit represents an important step in transforming recommendations into practical actions. In Maia, we recognize that our municipality's future directly depends on our ability to provide our young people with the necessary conditions to develop their full potential. The 5 pillars presented, from skills and competencies to fighting intergenerational inequalities, align perfectly with our municipal strategic vision. We want a Maia where young people can develop their skills, find decent work opportunities, feel socially included, and trust their institutions. This meeting represents a unique opportunity to learn from the best practice from OECD countries and adapt them to our local reality. Our commitment is clear: to work closely with all partners to implement these tools and create an environment where our young people can thrive. I wish everyone a productive event and hope that the discussion that will take place here will result in concrete benefits for Maia youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. Paulo Santos, Vice President of the Portuguese Youth of Sport and Youth, to take the floor.
Senhor Vereador Hernani Ribeiro, portanto, aqui uma palavra muito de agradecimento e, portanto, que nos acolhe aqui este evento e, portanto, também, desde que foi lançado o desafio à Câmara Municipal da Maia, que a Câmara disse logo que sim e, portanto, aqui um agradecimento muito especial ao Senhor Vereador. Estimado Raris Vojko, Presidente do Fórum Europeu da Juventude, estimada Mónica Kaiser, Conselheira Sénior da Direção de Emprego, Trabalho e Assuntos Sociais e Chefe de Divisão da Política Social da OCDE, estimado Gillian Dorner, Diretor Adjunto da Direção de Governança Pública da OCDE, estimados colegas e participantes. Este é um evento de grande relevância para a área da juventude, em que se destaca o compromisso de Portugal com a liderança em políticas da juventude, promovendo um futuro inclusivo e inovador para as próximas gerações. A Toolkit da OCDE, um conjunto de ferramentas para as políticas da juventude, é um instrumento muito importante para fortalecer as políticas de juventude, abrangendo diversas áreas como a educação e as competências, o emprego e o empreendedorismo, a saúde e a inclusão social, também como a participação na vida pública e justiça intergeracional. Estas também são as bandeiras e as prioridades do IPDJ e que este Conselho Diretivo assume trabalhando dia a dia. Espero que todos os participantes, tanto aqueles que estão a assistir presencial como estão em casa a assistir à distância, consigam aproveitar ao máximo o evento do lançamento do Toolkit da OCDE e, em particular, os seus recursos e potencialidades. E aproveitem este momento único para partilhar experiências e muitas aprendizagens. Bem-vindo a Portugal, bem-vindo à Maia. Muito obrigado.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. Ahmad Afrian, Managing Director of ASEAN Youth Organization, to take the floor, please.
Excellencies, distinguished guests and speakers, fellow young leaders across the globe, ladies and gentlemen. Hola, bom dia, hello, selamat pagi, a very good morning to all of you. It is definitely my great honor and privilege to be able to stand before you, to be invited to share today in this very beautiful country of Portugal, which, fun fact, got the third highest scores in the Global Youth Development Index out of 183 countries in the world. This publication publicized by the Commonwealth Publication last year. So how cool is that? Can we give a round of applause for Portugal, everyone? Allow me to start with introducing myself. My name is Ryan. I am all the way from Indonesia. So it took almost 18 hours to get here. A country that now is considered as an accession member of the OECD. I am representing the largest youth-led organization in Southeast Asia, where we just became the winner of the most prestigious prize in the region, ASEAN Prize 2024. We are ASEAN Youth Organization, which also one of the 6 young steering committee groups of OECD. I am 28 years old Indonesian millennial who has Japanese descent, lives in a province in Indonesia. I am a son, I am a Muslim, and have a degree in international security and peace, and I am now working full-timer as Managing Director of the ASEAN Youth Organization. The reasons why I'd like to share with you a few of my identities, and I am emphasizing the using I, because it is a reminder for us that young people like me have our own identities. We are unique, be it cultural or social backgrounds, ethnicity, religion, social status, ethnicity, and many other things. So recognizing and engaging roles of young people who can perform individually or collectively at all levels of policy making and also program implementation to voice out our needs, views, and experience is indeed very important. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today together for the launching of the OECD Youth Policy Toolkit, marking our meaningful youth engagement journey together. As a youth leader myself, I first experienced of the challenge when it comes to contributing meaningfully and strategically. Now that the trend of young people's meaningful involvement is increasing, we feel seen, heard, and recognized. When we know there will be a toolkit provided by OECD to make sure that the youth are meaningfully engaged in the programs and also policy making. I see this a big momentum for us. I believe the toolkit will provide us with effective resources for all stakeholders, allowing us to connect the dots between OECD at a very high level to the grassroots level. So it really promotes the inclusiveness of young people to make sure that we really, and I need to underline this as well, that we really love and also leave no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take this opportunity to direct the narrative of the youth that are now world shapers and leaders of the future. Please take a look, a moment of your surroundings now, to your right, to your left, and also in front and also your back. It is important for us that we need to recognize this is a real example. Let us all be reminded that the youth are not only the leaders of tomorrow, but youth are also the leaders, knowledge holders, equal partners, problem solvers of today. These are the powers that we have as youth. As Uncle Ben Parker said in the Spider-Man movie, with great power comes with great responsibility. So I believe it is our responsibility to have a comprehensive understanding of when, where, and how to enable meaningful youth engagement in policy making and program at local, national, regional, international levels. To make our meaningful youth engagement the most, I would like to challenge every one of us to work together to ensure clear follow-ups and work plans after the launch of the toolkit to measure and evaluate the expected outcomes and outputs as well to avoid tokenism, decoration, and manipulation in these meaningful youth engagement initiatives. I wish you a productive and enlightening day as we embark in this meaningful youth engagement together, guided by our shared commitment to meaningful youth participation and celebration for youth and with youth. Obrigado and thank you.
Thank you all for your contributions. The colleagues from the OECD will now share also some opening words and present the OECD Youth Policy Toolkit in more detail. We will have the honor of hearing from Monica Kaisa, Senior Advisor in the Directorate of Employment, Labor and Social Affairs, and Head of the OECD's Social Policy Division, and Gillian Dorner, Deputy Director of the OECD's Public Governance Directorate, who will introduce us to the objectives, structure, and main highlights of this important resource. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the OECD, Gillian and I are absolutely delighted to welcome you to the launch of our toolkit. And we want to start by thanking Maya and this wonderful place, Tech Maya, and of course, the Portuguese Institute for Sport and Youth for hosting us and for bringing so many young people. We see so many young people in the room, which is absolutely great. We want to talk to you, we want to hear your opinions, and we hope that what we will be discussing today is going to be useful for you. So before we start with summarizing the main findings that our teams have produced for the toolkit, let me say a little bit something about the work on youth at the OECD. So the COVID-19 pandemic for OECD countries, like for everybody else around the world, was a real wake-up when it comes to the situation of youth. Because we know, and many of you have experienced it really firsthand, how difficult the situation was for young people who suddenly were deprived of all their social contacts, deprived of their education, and had to really adapt to the situation at a time which is so crucial for you to be with people, to be with your peers, and to be out there learning. And so the mental health challenges that came out of the pandemic were, I think, really for many OECD countries a call to really say we need to do more for our young people, and we need to solve this absolutely rampant mental health challenge across the OECD. So, but it's not only the pandemic. We know that there's an increasing number of global challenges, climate change, the rapid digital transformation, although I have to say, seeing how young people are dealing with this, I'm not sure the challenge is for you. I think it's for us, for the older people, because you guys are so savvy in digital that, of course, you will have to acquire the skills you will need in this digital world, but I think you're already a lot better at this than we are. So, chapeau to you young people. But then there's also the demographic transition, aging, the economic uncertainty, and regional conflicts that we're all living today. So this is a challenge for everyone, but some of these challenges are even worse for or greater for young people. So in 2022, OECD countries decided to do an OECD recommendation on youth. OECD recommendations are a little bit like what you may know from EU directives, but they're less binding, but they are negotiated instruments where the OECD decides to set out many different policy measures and actions that countries that sign these recommendations commit to. So basically, everybody has to agree that these are the things that should be done, and then they're like an outline of a menu almost of things that countries should be doing to help young people. And the OECD itself will assess the progress of its member countries every 5 years following the adoption of a recommendation. Now, today we launched the OECD Youth Policy Toolkit, which provides hands-on guidance, and with over 70 good practice examples from all of the 38 member countries, it's supposed to help governments who want to make better policies for youth to adapt their policies and use these practical examples. And what I should also say is that these toolkits are not only with these examples, which we built in a horizontal way with many different people across the OECD, and particularly with our colleagues from the Public Governance Directorate, but they're also supposed to create a conversation. So the idea of the OECD is to bring governments from all over the world together and have a conversation about these different things. So the idea of an event like this is also to network, to meet new people, and to say, hey, I heard about this great example from country X. Can you please, OECD, put me in touch with these people so that we meet them and that we can exchange in more detail. So what I'm going to say and what Jillian's going to say will be including some examples, but it'll be very short. So it's like a teaser, and if you like any of these examples, do follow up with our teams to find out more about them. So the first, somebody's changing the slides, I think? Yes? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the toolkit is built around 5 key policy pillars that reflect the needs of young people, and you can see them here. There's skills and competencies, labor market outcomes and entrepreneurship, young people's social and health outcomes, young people's trust in government and public institutions, and the administrative capacities of governments to address inequalities between different age groups. And the innovative policies that we identified in the toolkit, they reflect different national contexts and socioeconomic situations, because obviously you can never just transport one policy measure from one country to another. But these examples can inspire governments who want to do better for young people. So let's start with education and skills. Here you have the skills and competencies, and this shows good practice examples that can help all young people, regardless of where they come from, what their circumstances are, to develop knowledge and skills that they need to face challenges and opportunities such as digitalization, but also very importantly, the green transition. And we have to address inequalities and barriers to create environments where everybody can thrive and transition smoothly into work or into future further learning. But today, unfortunately, in many OECD countries, we have far too many young people who remain behind in education. And just to give you one example, socioeconomically disadvantaged students in OECD countries are 7 times more likely than advantaged students not to achieve basic mathematics proficiency on average. So this is unacceptable. This means if you come from a poor family, your chances of actually achieving educational success are so much less. And this is something that is so unequal and so unfair that we really have to act on it. And in the toolkit, you'll find 24 good practice examples that focus on education and skills development, and I'll just give you a few. For example, we have Project Break. It's a joint initiative of Estonia, Iceland, and Lithuania, so 3 countries together, to challenge gender stereotypes in career thinking, both within and outside education. So that's an important thing because we know that women are not going into STEM professions, and this is where lucrative job opportunities are in the future, and so this is an interesting initiative to change that. Then there's a program called Computers for Education that comes from Colombia, which helps to build better ICT infrastructures in school. Another example comes from Slovenia and Switzerland. There's 2 programs called PUMO in Slovenia and the IBA apprenticeships in Switzerland, which are very interesting for dropouts. So these are specific programs targeted to people who drop out of schools, how to bring them back into the education system. And then we have plenty of examples also of career guidance and mentoring programs in the UK, New Zealand, and in Germany, and programs, very importantly, I'm sure you will agree, youth in the room, to offer financial assistance to students, which come from the US, Canada, and the Netherlands. Now, and all of this will, in the breakout groups, will be explored in more detail, so this is just a teaser to show you what we're talking about. The second one, second pillar is employment and entrepreneurship. And here you see, again, the slide with the different areas, because we know that the transition between education and the world of work is often what poses problems, that it's difficult to get from your education system into regular employment. And again, it's particular people from disadvantaged backgrounds, not surprisingly, who have the worst the problems in this respect. They don't have the networks, they don't have the parents that can help them, they don't have the money to smooth over such periods, so again, there's a strong focus on that. And the other thing is that young people often would like to be their own boss, but they don't really know how to enter entrepreneurship. So this is a very important part of this pillar as well, to encourage young people to do startups, to start their own companies, and see how they can do that. And the OECD has a long line of work, and I'm really happy that our colleague, who is a specialist on this, David Halabisky, is here also to talk about entrepreneurship and young people. So just a little bit of data from the OECD. We always come with data. In 2023, on average across the OECD, 1 in 8 young people aged 15 to 29 were not in employment, education, or training. So that's a lot, 1 in 8, the so-called needs. So this is why we are worried about this and why OECD countries want to do something about it. And we have 12 good practices in the toolkit to help young people find more and better quality jobs. For example, there's youth employment subsidies, which are used in 19 OECD countries. That's a lot out of 38, to help unemployed young people into jobs. Then there's what they call the WANTO grant in the US, for example, that helps women enter into male-dominated industries. Again, this is this idea of STEM, but not only. And the Enabling Accessibility Fund from Canada that helps young people with disability to improve their workplace by advocating for accessibility. Now, let me just say one thing, because we also do a lot of work on gender. We keep stressing that women should be going into male-dominated jobs and doing STEM and so on. We should also pay attention to the fact that young men should go into jobs that are now dominated by women, because we need more gender equality cutting both ways, and not only always telling women that they need to do something else. I think men also need to change their career paths. So just that for the records. Finally, to boost entrepreneurship in the program Young Entrepreneurs Succeed, there's programs in Greece, Italy, Poland, and Spain with coaching and mentoring, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that later. Finally, and that's my last slide before I pass over to Jillian, social inclusion and health outcomes. Social inclusion is something that goes beyond work and training and education. So we're looking also at policies to ensure adequate income, affordable housing, very, very big concern for young people in almost all OECD countries and getting worse. And I mentioned before mental health, but not only mental health, physical health is also a priority here. We have a survey at the OECD which is called Risks That Matter, where we ask people what keeps them up at night. So we'd say, people, what are your biggest worries and what do you think of the social policies governments are offering you in order to address your worries? And it shows that 7 in 10 young people face financial concerns, and we've just done a new policy paper that shows that work does not always pay for young people. And so there's different ways that countries can address this. The Netherlands, for example, has an earnings disregard for single parents on welfare. And in Ireland, there's a back-to-work family dividend. So these are measures where you try to ease people off benefit into work, and encourage their labor market participation, rather than creating traps where you stay on benefit quite simply because you cannot afford to lose the money that you might lose when you enter a job. Access to adequate and good quality housing. This is an area where the OECD in the last couple of years has been doing a lot of work. And again, our Risks That Matter survey shows that 6 out of 10 young people are worried about housing. Honestly, I still find that surprising. I thought it would be even more, only 60%, because it seems that everybody almost is worried about housing. And there's different ways that countries are addressing this. One of the things that is done, for example, is a housing first approach in Ireland, which offers secure housing and a range of age-appropriate support services to facilitate independent living for young people. And finally, let me say a few more things about mental health. We know that the COVID crisis triggered a lot of mental health problems, but some of these existed pre-COVID. So for example, in Japan, for many years, there have been a group of people who have withdrawn from society called the hikikomori. And the hikikomori, that we've addressed this already in a youth review way before the pandemic, but of course the pandemic has made things worse. So there's an intervention that offers supports to parents, because often parents are the ones that do not know how to deal with a situation like that. Then there's another program, very interesting, called True Love in Mexico, that focuses on addressing dating violence among young people. And we all know violence against women is a horrible, horrible other pandemic across the world, which we're having difficulties changing. So starting with young people in this respect is important. And last but not least, and we'll hear more about that today, Headspace in Australia offers integrated support for young people and their families to improve mental health. And we're very lucky to have somebody who came all the way from Australia to Porto with us, who's going to tell us firsthand in this. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for being here. And now I pass the floor to Gillian to tell us about the rest of the toolkit.
Thank you, Monica, and good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today to present to you the 2 remaining pillars of the OECD Youth Policy Toolkit. And it's so great to see such a diverse set and group of young people in the room. It's not my normal audience, so I actually feel the pressure right now. I really want to talk to you about these 2 pillars that are essentially what we call public governance measures that governments can take to support young people. Now, public governance is a term that I'm not sure many people really know what it means, but essentially we are talking about something often slightly less tangible than what Monica's already been talking about, but just as important. And the first of those pillars that I want to present to you is on the trust that young people have in their government and in other public institutions. Trust is an incredibly important ingredient in our societies and our democracies. Without it, without a certain level of trust in government and in the institutions that support us in our societies, we see our societies start to break down. And we are starting to see that in many cases across many of our democracies, including in members of the OECD. Youth participation and representation in public institutions and intergenerational dialogue are therefore incredibly important triggers of trust. However, starting with youth representation, young people are underrepresented in government. I'm sure many of you will know that. In 2022, only 2% of cabinet members across OECD countries were aged 35 or younger. And according to the OECD's 2023 survey of drivers of trust in public institutions, young people trust government less than older generations. Here's some more data. So 43% of people over 50 report having high or moderately high trust in national government, compared to only 36% amongst young people. This lack of trust is reflected in lower voter turnout and higher polarization among young people. Research also shows that young women are becoming more liberal, as young men are increasingly becoming more conservative. There is data to support that, and our trust survey also shows that the gap in trust in government between young men and young women is growing. Young men tend to have more trust in government, and young women have less, which is very interesting, and we don't have all the answers as to why that's happening, but it's something that we're taking very seriously. This gap actually increased by 8 percentage points between 2021 and 2023 in OECD countries. The toolkit therefore contains examples of measures that countries have been using to address this trust deficit. They include, for example, removing barriers to youth participation in democratic processes and decision-making, promoting meaningful engagement in policy-making, and encouraging intergenerational dialogue. Another example outlined in the toolkit is the implementation of civic education programs, notably in Denmark, here in Portugal, and in Sweden. These can equip young people with the skills and knowledge to actively and meaningfully engage in both civic life and democratic processes. Such programs can actually have real, tangible outcomes. In Sweden, for example, about 1/3 of students participating in the Skolval program said that they were more motivated to vote in the next national elections as a result. The toolkit also contains good examples of youth volunteering and civic service engagement programs, which are in place in at least 16 OECD countries. This is actually very commendable, but we would like to see more. Youth volunteering and civic engagement foster young people's skills, participation, and active citizenship, and increase young people's employability and contribution to society. We look forward to hearing more about this shortly from Kylie Hamilton, who will present the work of Canada's Service Corps. Next slide, please. So moving on to the final pillar, which is about the administrative and technical capacities to address age-based discrimination. So this last pillar of the toolkit looks at how governments can better address age-based inequalities and young people's diverse characteristics and needs. This is important, as failing to do so can perpetuate existing inequalities within and across generations. The pillar focuses tools in 3 areas. First of all, what we call age disaggregated data collection, so collecting data based on different age groups, which enables countries to identify disparities and provides the evidence and motivation to integrate an intergenerational perspective in decision-making. This includes, for example, in when governments make decisions about how to spend money and in passing laws. Evidence from the OECD Global Report on Youth, Governance for Youth, Trust and Intergenerational Justice, Fit for All Generations, indicate that only half of OECD countries actually collect age disaggregated data. OECD countries have data gaps regarding youth across policy areas such as justice, housing, and the inclusion of vulnerable people. Several countries have recognized this need to improve, and Costa Rica, for example, has developed a national youth strategy to gather such data. Second, adopting integrated approaches to youth policymaking and service delivery can ensure new policies and programs are responsive to young people's needs and concerns. Many OECD members, including Mexico, the Slovak Republic, Spain, and the EU, have adopted a youth strategy to inform policymaking and service delivery across the whole of government. Countries such as Austria, the EU, France and Germany apply youth checks, which are regulatory impact assessments, so basically looking at the costs and benefits of laws and how these laws can affect young people. And third, incorporating an intergenerational perspective into governance helps countries understand how policies may impact current and future generations. For example, Australia produces regular intergenerational reports on how future demographic and economic developments might impact the long-term sustainability of current policies and budgets. This supports informed decisions for the benefit of future generations. Finally, if you could move on to the last slide, please. One point that I really wanted to emphasize here is the importance of the youth voice in all of this. We might sound a little bit bureaucratic, and to be honest with you, we are. But the OECD work on youth underscores that young people should not just be beneficiaries of policies. It's paramount that you are actively involved in their creation. And you'll see some of the comments that we received up on the screen here on the toolkit, and we really very much hope to hear more from you in the discussions later. So as part of the toolkit's preparation, young people and youth organizations through the OECD Young, our network of youth organizations, were systematically consulted in the preparation of the toolkit. Their insights were fundamental to shaping each pillar, making them both relevant to and resonant with the youth it aims to support. In this, young people notably called for integrated strategies reflecting their own perspectives, more opportunities for meaningful engagement and representation, and policy solutions to their most pressing challenges, as Monica has already set out, around mental health stigma and difficulty securing employment and housing. So, moving on to the final slide, let me thank all of the policymakers who have shared their practices, shaping the content of this toolkit. I'd like to thank the Friends of Youth Plus at the OECD, and in particular Marilette Van As, who's sat down here and we'll be hearing from later, who's with us today, and the OECD Public Governance Committee, as well as the Employment, Labour and Social Affairs Committees of the OECD. That's where member governments come together to make these decisions, for their support, which has been essential in ensuring the toolkit was delivered today, and ensuring that we fed young people's voices and their real needs and aspirations into it. I encourage all policymakers, youth organisations and stakeholders here today who are connected virtually to make use of this toolkit. It is nothing without implementation, so it's absolutely vital that this is now used. Its valuable information, guidance and good practices can help chart a course for action to build a better future for and with young people. So thank you very much. I hope that's given you a good taste of what we are talking about, and we very much look forward to hearing more from you in the sessions after this opening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica and Gillian, for this insightful presentation. It was great to know more about this valuable and practical tool for youth. We now begin our roundtable, which will include representatives of youth organizations and policymakers. This is an opportunity for us to explore in more depth the challenges and good practices in implementing youth policies. I'm happy to introduce our panelists, which I also invite to join me on stage. Ahmad Afrian, Managing Director of ASEAN Youth Organization. Please take the floor. Marilette Van As, International Coordinator, DJ, Digitalization and Public Administration of the Ministry of the Interior and Kingdom Relations of the Netherlands, and Vice Chair of the OECD Public Governance Committee. André Cardoso, President of the Portuguese National Youth Council. Trude Eliassen, Senior Advisor of the Department for Labour Market Affairs of Norway. And Dan McCabe from World Skills International. We invite all participants, including those following us online, to stay tuned and save their questions and comments in case we will have time for Q&A at the end of the discussions. For the panelists, let me just remind you to keep your interventions concise if possible. Thank you all for being here today. Ryan, I heard you allow your friends to call you Ryan. Will you allow me that honor too today?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much. My first question is for you. What role do youth organizations play in amplifying young people's voices? And how can governments effectively partner with them to create lasting impacts, notably in Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific?
All right, thank you so much for the question. I'm honored again to be able to share. Hola, bom dia, colleagues, fellow young leaders. Can we give another round of applause for us? Because I think we've been following all the series of agendas as well. The list goes on, but you remind us that we have very limited time. So let me start with youth organizations definitely has so many diverse role in terms of advancing the meaningful youth engagement. When it comes to policy making and also program, what I understand and also AYU understands, first would be we need to be able to understand that we are having the role as watchdog to the stakeholders, especially to the governments, meaning that we need to be involved heavily and also strategically related to monitoring and evaluation. I think one of the speakers as well mentioned the importance of monitoring and evaluation. It is very important, which sometimes overlooked. That would be one of the based on our experience. So it is really important for us to sort things out when it comes to monitoring evaluation. For example, like after we launch this toolkit, how can we make sure the follow-ups actions to localize in each countries, 38 OECD members countries and also the other dialogue partners as well. For example, like in ASEAN Youth Organization, one thing that I would like to share with you, we definitely have, to some extent, strategic role in advocacy and also in educational activities. Advocacy meaning that we also got a mandate from the ASEAN Secretariat involved in making sure the mental health issues in Southeast Asia also tap in related to the youth. So we just got this mandate from the ASEAN Secretariat. Other than that, also we focus on gig economy because after pandemic situation, gig economy definitely rising. Especially for the youngsters, we able to work anywhere and with any institutions. For example, like I'm also working with our counterparts in Paris, France, and things like that. So it is really important for us to make sure that that focus is still be there. We also involved in global, regional, and so national and local levels because we really need to make sure that we connecting the dots as well between the global levels and also the local levels, which is very important. Other than that, producing knowledge and innovations also something that we need to make sure. For example, like 2 days ago, we just successfully organized our biggest event, annual event, which is ASEAN Youth Conference. Even though the name is ASEAN, but we also entertaining international youth leaders as well to join from European countries and South Americas as well, from Asia Pacific definitely. So they produce outcome, which is set of policy recommendation, and we submitted to the ASEAN Secretariat for the consideration to create policy. One of the policy would be ASEAN Work Plan on Youth. So we as the youth organization, youth-led organization and youth-focused organization, we tried our best to tap in every channels that we can do. So be it at a very high level, also the grassroots levels, because we have chapters across Southeast Asia members and also other dialogue partners. But really, I think I would like to draw your attention more to monitoring and evaluation. I would like to take one of the best practices from the toolkit because I have, I get a privilege to review it provided by OECD colleagues. And I think one of the best practice from one of the OECD member countries, which is from Sweden, they have a scheme which allows the public can also help with monitoring and evaluation through web portal. But unfortunately, I forget the name because it's written on the local language. But basically, they have like 60 indicators to make sure that policy and also program implementations can be monitored with those indicators, which I think Southeast Asia member countries, we need to learn from our colleagues from Sweden as well. So that's why hopefully maybe with the approval from OECD colleagues, we'll definitely share with the stakeholders in Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific so that we could be able to implement the best practices from the OECD member countries. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, it was great to hear you talk about the importance of monitoring and evaluation, because it is indeed an extremely important dimension of the sustainability of projects and interventions. So thank you so much. Now I pass the floor to Ms. Trude Eliassen. You have been following the elaboration of the toolkit for the Norwegian government. What do you see as the main value of the toolkit for policymakers? And can you give us some concrete examples from the Norwegian case, please?
Thank you. Before answering the question, I will start by thanking OECD for inviting me to this important launch in beautiful and friendly Portugal. Norway, along with other countries, has contributed to developing this toolkit. I look forward to exchange ideas and experiences with the other participants in this gathering and to bring back valuable insight to inform policy development in Norway. Norway frequently refers to OECD documents in its policy development, highlighting the value of OECD's comparative analysis and recommendation. These analyses help us compare Norway's status and challenges with other countries. It inspires further action and allow us to share our experience, both successes and seeking inspiration and advice from other countries in areas where we face significant challenges and persistent problems. The Toolkit for Youth highlights core areas where efforts are essential to ensure young people good lives and offers solutions on how this can be achieved, based on experiences from other countries. It also points to indicators for measuring progress in this area from a comparative perspective among OECD countries. The toolkit is useful because it provides easy access to various policy initiatives from a range of countries in a comparative context. The examples are linked to challenges and policy recommendations they aim to address. The recommendation and the toolkit provide us with a broader knowledge base when developing better policies for youth. Our approach to the toolkit is also influenced by our labor market situation. With high employment, low unemployment, and high productivity with high qualification requirements. So you could say we are in a kind of lucky status, but it also comes with challenges. This means that most job seekers who can meet these requirements are employed. Many of those who are outside the labor market are particularly vulnerable because they have complex challenges as health issues, especially mental health issues, limited work experiences, weak skills in the Norwegian language, and social issues. My responsibility is to develop policy that enhance young people's opportunities for quality employment in the regular labor market. Many are on health-related benefits, and those with mental disorders are overrepresented among those receiving a benefit. As this is a major challenge in Norway, we are particularly interested in policies that can address these challenges and enhance young people's opportunities. Since the toolkit presents recommendation, context, and examples of good practices, the document makes it easier to access its relevance and to address its relevance for us in various areas. We seek targeted, cost-effective initiatives to address our challenges. A key focus is tailored or income support system to enhance young people's job opportunities while providing a robust safety net. We also aim to design cost-effective, personalized follow-up services that meet diverse needs and ensure holistic, well-coordinated support. Additionally, we strive to strengthen employers' incentives to hire vulnerable young people and improve the precision and effectiveness of subsidies. The analysis, guidance, and examples gathered in the toolkit will provide us with valuable input in this process, even though not everything is equally relevant from a Norwegian context. The toolkit also shows that we are not alone in these challenges we face. Many countries are facing the same challenges. The OECD recommendation to create better opportunities for young people promotes holistic strategies across countries to improve young people's lives and strengthen their participation in economic, public, and social life. This gives hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting the importance of employment and the labor market for young people. It was very insightful. Marilet.
Is it me?
I think it's solved. I think it was me. I think it was me. So Marilet, back to you. How can the toolkit support broader efforts of countries in building trust and reinforcing democracy?
Okay, well, let me see if it works. You hear me well? No, I thought so. Let me see if I, by accident, pressed a button. I think I did. I think you should be able to hear me in a little second from now. And otherwise, I'll just speak up.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, this is my first minute of the 4-minute intervention, so I will have to cut it short again. So, indeed, how can we increase trust? And as Gillian also mentioned, I represent both the Public Governance Committee, which is the 38 countries in the OECD who are in government. I work for myself for the Ministry of the Interior in the Netherlands, for example. 38 countries talking together about how we increase trust, among other things, by the way, and also how you engage every age group in society in getting more confident in what government does and how we basically work for all the citizens. As Gillian mentioned, we have seen in the last years that especially young people are less involved in government. I can imagine because it's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of difficult language, and sometimes you don't even know what policies they're making on. It will be for the greater good, but hey, it's also quite far away from your daily work. And I think that's one of the things of the toolkits. It's a very big document with a lot of good examples. But now this baby has been born, how do we keep it alive and how do we make sure that all these good initiatives that are mentioned in it find their way and help you, me, basically everyone, both on the national level but also on more local levels of government, to make it these examples be brought alive and be an inspiration for how you do your work on a daily basis. So creating democratic resilience, as we say, is not an easy thing. It is very fluid. It was mentioned before. It is something that you don't see, you don't touch. So in the toolkits, there are practical examples that have a lot of data underneath it that you can say, okay, if I do this, then I educate someone, then it will mean that someone has a better skill set and we can help them with that. With democracy and how you become more confident that a system, a government, basically helps you improve and works for you rather than against you is not always as tangible. It's not that visible. And I think one of the most important things is also what you mentioned in your opening speech. It was that you need to feel seen, heard, and recognized. And it's the combination of those three that is not easy. So I really hope that looking at the toolkit, you will see them as great examples, see them as a lot of inspiration. And as was also mentioned by Gillian before and by Monica, if you have questions on the examples in it, please feel free to reach out, not only to them, but also to the countries that are mentioned in the toolkit itself, because we cannot make it better if we don't get feedback on how you receive it. So that is one element. I have a lot of other elements as well. Youth representation, for example, in public institutions, in parts of government is very important, so that you can not only create policy for people. In my case, I'm part of Ministry of Interior in the Netherlands. We try to include a lot of young people in our own government organizations, either by traineeships, but also in new ways. So for example, we're also experimenting in the Netherlands with how do you get people on board who have the right mindset, who have the right eagerness to change the world, but maybe do not have that university diploma. Can we offer traineeships and include them in our system? And those are small elements that we have created by listening to young people around us, and we're piloting that. We're trying to see if that works for government. So getting not only the discussions outside in platforms like this where we talk to young people, and I truly hope that during the break we will talk a lot more with many of you, but also get them on board inside of government to help us change the world and make it a better place. Oh, that's another song. But anyway. So, what I hope you get out of this session is that you go read the document, explore it, and find those examples that really are an inspiration to you, and then get back to us on how we can improve it, because it's not only one document, we have to keep it alive, as I mentioned, and help us implement it and make it a part of, a new way forward, and including more young voices in policy making. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilet. Yeah, the horizontal way in which the toolkit was made, I think, also promotes this trust building and this practical resources to be found and to be shared.
Yeah.
And to
trust is not given, it is earned. So we have to do something to show that basically we're worthy of the trust.
and practical ways like the one you described are definitely good ways to do it. So, yeah, we're counting on you. André, young people tend to vote less than other age groups and remain underrepresented in public institutions, including in parliaments. What do you see as key barriers limiting youth participation and representation in public life? And what measures should governments take to tackle these trends?
Hi, Patricia. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you all for the invitation. And congratulations for the work that you have done with this toolkit. And thank you for the invitation to be here. It is a quite question, because it is true that in Portugal, youth voter participation has constantly been lower than older voters. Although, as many other countries, I believe this trend, I think that is challenged. And we have to look to the recent data. We still don't have data for the last legislative election, but in 2022, legislative elections, youth participation in Portugal was marked by a higher level of abstention. However, the European Commission showed us that in these European elections, 64% of young people stated that they intended to vote. So I truly believe that there is a clear trend towards changing the paradigm. However, I think that this is still not acceptable. The idea would be to achieve full participation from all young people. And now, not only use abstention high, but we also lack good participation and representation of young people in public institutions, as you said. Since the last legislative elections, just to you know, we have seen a decrease in the number of deputies under 30. And just so you know, at this moment, we just have only 9 deputies that are under 30 in our parliament. And I think that there are several factors that can explain this, and we have to be more aware about these factors. On the one hand, there is a distrust in political institutions. Many young people in Portugal show great distrust towards traditional political institutions, like the parties, which may lead to a lack of interest in voting. Young people, particularly those from lower social class, often feel marginalized by the political system, which contributes to abstentions. And look, we have to be more aware about we are out of the system. We are not in Porto or in Lisbon. We have to get more people to be interested in the political system. The lack of knowledge about the electoral process can be another factor that can explain this. A study by the Francisco Manuel dos Santos Foundation showed that the Portuguese youth tend not to engage as much in political issues, often due to a lack of a deeper education on the benefits of electoral participation. And another factor that I think that is important to mention is the socioeconomic factors that also influence the lower participation of young people. Those with greater financial insecurity and fewer job prospects tend to vote less, seeing politics as something far removed from their daily concerns. And similarly, the low participation of young people in political position can also be explained by various factors. Once again, there is a disinteresting and distrust in political institutions. Secondly, there is a lower level of civic education. And although civic education has been included in some school curricula, many young people lack proper training on how the political system works and the importance of the participation. A lack of information about how to vote, the mechanisms of the electoral procedures, and the role of political institutions can create a sense of alienation. Another important obstacle that I think that explains the low participation of young people is the difficulty to access political decision-making process. Politics in Portugal is dominated by older political figures. Sorry to tell him that. It's dominated by the same parties, in the old parties. In all of these parties, I take the risk to say that as a little representation of young people, especially in the position of greater visibility and power. There is a clearly lack of political representation space, and this lack of youth candidates, especially in larger parties, means that many young people do not feel represented or do not see their place in politics. Alongside this, let me point out the lack of connection with young people's concern. Traditional politics in Portugal often fails to address issues that are priorities for young people. The precarious job market, the lack of qualified job opportunities, difficult accessing houses, that is clearly a big problem that we are facing. And the climate crisis are issues that are only now beginning to be talked about. These issues have been excluded from political discussion for many years, and this can explain why young people don't feel representative. Despite of all this, I believe that young people are not distant from politics. What are they distant is from traditional models of politicals where decisions are actually made. Many young people do not identify with traditional political parties, for example, and prefer alternative forms of political mobilization. I truly believe that each of you that represent a youth organization, a students' association, are made politics, but don't identify with the traditional politics, the way to do politics. And I think to combating the lack of youth participation in politicals require structural, political and cultural measures. Through solid civic education, reform in the electoral process, support for youth representation and more accessible participation platform, governments can create an environment that allows young people not only to feel representative, but also to actively participate in decisions that shape the country's future. Moreover, the digital inclusion and social empowerment are key to ensuring that young people feel motivated to contribute to build a fair and more democratic society. And to finish, to respond to when we are talking about the measure, I think that we need to invest in the civic education of young people. However, more importantly, we need to ensure that all young people are representative in political structure. We cannot accept that young people are not representative in the bodies that make decisions. Only by ensuring that young people are heard and their demands are taken into account will we motivate them to participate and believe that democracy is the best political system we have.
Thank you, André, for a very comprehensive analysis of the Portuguese case, and a very insightful one too. Now, then, it's your turn. As a champion of World Skills International, what do you see as the challenges that young people grapple with in education and during their transition into the labor market? And are there examples in the toolkit that you would recommend to policymakers?
Thank you all for having me here. It's great to be in Porto with the OECD. What I'll do is I'll start by speaking about the education system, and then I'll move on to the industry section of the question and then tie it up with hopefully a good example. There's a lot of young people in this room. I'm not exactly sure where you are in your career. Some people might be still in education, some people might be early in their career. The one thing I've noticed as part of World Skills International, which is a global skills organization that allows young people to compete in TVET skills, so that's like anything in kind of a hands-on apprenticeship style vocational education system. And they compete against each other in kind of an Olympics of jobs. Now, that gives you a lot of access to a lot of different countries' TVET systems and a lot of scope to see what different countries have to tackle with across every skill sector. And one thing I've noticed is that in education there are two very different issues, like if I was to over-summarize it. The first one is what I like to call over-opportunity and then under-opportunity. So in countries like mine and probably Portugal, we've got too much opportunity. Young people often don't know what job to select. You know, we're like, what do I do? I've got all these options in front of me. They're interested in all these different areas, but they're not sure what job to do. And quite often, by the time they reach an established career, the job they end up in, they never knew existed when they first started on their quest to find that job. So how do we tackle this? Well, personally, the way I like to encourage people, and this is a challenge I've got at the moment with my younger sibling, is to tell them to just push forward to something they're passionate about. If you've got a lot of opportunity in front of you in the education space, you can't really go wrong by pursuing what you care about. because the soft skills and transferable skills you will learn in that sector will often lead you down a path to somewhere you're happy. I think sometimes a mistake that's made in education is we go for the job that's going to pay the highest at the end, and then you very quickly realize that you don't care or you're not passionate about that subject, so then you end up reverting back and you lose many years of your educational life. And then we have under opportunity, and this is something we see a lot in rural areas and underdeveloped economies. And this is where people who know what they want to do or just want to do something, but the opportunities that they have are very limited. So, for example, Mille, who we'll hear from later, is from South Africa that has a lot of very rural areas and rural communities who don't have access to the same skills that someone like me from a very densely populated United Kingdom would have. So the way that we solve those problems is there's two. The first one is you can build training centres. A lot of the times people in these communities, they just want something different. They're not desperate to go into a single skill sector. They want to discover what opportunities lay for them. And these training centres can give them a place to start, and then they can branch out from there. And then the other problem, which is mostly found in developed countries as well, is the transport links. Porto has a wealth of different opportunities for young people, but João, my friend who you'll hear from later in the afternoon, he's from a rural area, and I went and visited his home, and it's a beautiful area, and I was like, I'd love to live here, but there's no jobs. And the transport links from the rural areas to central Porto don't allow him to live there, and therefore don't allow him to contribute to that economy. So it's about the transport links and the training centres. If you can't have training centres everywhere, like in a city, how can you build stronger links to those? There's obviously lots of issues, but these are just the ones that I've found most common in my experiences working with world skills. The second one is industry. Now, industry is an interesting one because every industry is different, and I wouldn't like to speak on behalf of other sectors, but I think one thing we can all agree on, especially in the digital sector, is it moves extremely fast. The jobs let's say we went to a university lecture today, all of us, we went to Porto, and this was a lecture about film. The chances are in a month's time, a lot of that would be out of date, or some of it would be out of date. So how do we empower our educational institutions to have the most up-to-date information? So the skills people are learning are the skills that the labour market require. And that is incredibly difficult to do in a traditional education system. TVET does a much stronger job of equipping people, but TVET isn't the solution for every sector. You can't apply that format to every job area. So the solution to that problem is industry participation. You have to have industry helping shape curriculums, and governments need to be agile to allow the educational institutions to shape their courses around those requirements. For example, in Manchester, I went to a couple of universities recently, and I spoke with them about what we require in the video games industry from new graduates. And they were unable to give us sufficient maneuverability within their curriculum for us to do what we wanted. So I go, oh, we would really like these skills. And they go, oh, we can't do that because it doesn't give you enough credits in this. We need to tick these boxes for that. And then, oh, the examining board would need to go. That's great. But the private sector, they don't really care about those problems. This is an educational issue where they need to adapt their structure to be more agile to the movement of industry. Because the private sector, if money starts going down, we change the system to make money come up. So it allows private sector to be really, really agile, where education isn't. And that's ultimately where this mismatch of jigsaw pieces come. And I think that's up to policymakers to empower educators to be more agile. So what example from the toolkit do I have that does a great job of this? So in the UK public sector, we have something called the Civil Service Fast Stream. I wanted to make sure I got that right. But the Civil Service Fast Stream, I was reading about it on the toolkit, and I thought it was this brilliant idea from the UK government, where they're one of the biggest employers in the United Kingdom. They employ thousands and thousands of people across the whole United Kingdom, from every background, from every city, every town, everything from local councils to Westminster government. And their system of building out this platform for people to transition from higher education into the public sector, into an employment role, whether they can then move up into higher positions in government or maybe transfer into maybe a role like somewhere like this in the OECD, if you've worked in the public sector and you can then understand with the hierarchies and intricacies of government. It's an incredibly powerful soft skill set that can give people a lot of opportunity later in life. And I think what the UK government is doing with that scheme is a really fantastic first step for many people who are struggling to find where to go in their careers, and maybe even a marathon for the people who have found their home. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dan, for your practical examples and perspective. Now we will dive into our second round of questions. So, Andrea, I'm going back to you now. Not all young people make a successful transition into the labor market, and some young people face a high risk of falling into poverty. Could you elaborate on the needs of young people in vulnerable situations and the solutions proposed by the Portuguese National Youth Council and your member organizations?
Patricia, you are right. The transition of young people in Portugal to the labour market has been marked by several structural and situational challenges. In Portugal, the youth unemployment rates, just to you know, has traditionally been higher comparing with the national level. Although the situation has improved since 2008 financial crisis and economic recovery measures of recent years, youth unemployment remain a concern. Moreover, one of the main problems affecting young people's transition into the labour market is labour precariousness. Many young people end up accepting temporary, part-time or freelance contracts with low wage and no guarantees on long-term stability. This phenomenon is more pronounced in sectors such as tourism, hospitality, retail, and increasingly information technologies. The lack of job stability negatively impacts young people's prospects for economic independence, making it difficult for them to accessing house markets or plan the future, for example. Another crucial problem that I identified that affects the transition of young people to the labour market is the mismatch between what young people learn at schools and universities and what the labour market actually asks for us. Although the proportion of young people with a university degree has significantly increased, many young people with higher education are unable to find jobs that match their qualifications, often accepting positions with lower qualification or even experiencing structural unemployment. There is also a growing perception that universities and schools in Portugal do not adequately prepare young people for demands of the labour market, specifically in terms of soft skills, as you said, and specific in technical skills in areas like programming, engineering, digital marketing, etc. Also, we have significant regional inequalities which affects people's employment opportunities. Just so you know, Lisbon and Oporto concerns most of the well-paid jobs, while the interior of the country face a shortage or skilled employment. This creates a phenomenon that I called as youth emigration, with many people leaving poor regions to move to large cities or abroad in search of better living and working conditions. The transition to labour market is marked by psychology challenges for many young people. And to finish, to help mitigate these challenges, I think that we have a concern like four measures, main measures. Firstly, we have to ensure that young people have more disposable income. This can be achieved if we continue to increase the national minimum wage at the same time that we increase the average salary. Next, there needs to be more oversight of precariousness that still exists in Portugal. And finally, government should consider in concrete ways to integrate young people with disabilities. And to finish, I think that when we are talking about measuring political publics, we think that higher wages, a better balance between personal life and professional life, like we know as work-life balance. These will create a true integration, and young people will be able to achieve one of their main goals, that is their emancipation.
Thank you, André. Before we move on to the other questions and the other panelists, I just want to ask you, although this discussion is being marvelous, we need to be more concise with this second round of questions if possible. So, Ryan, linking back to the previous question, young volunteers often drive change and provide essential support in their communities. How should governments better support and leverage their contribution, also based on your experiences in Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific? And how can the practices included in the toolkits support reform efforts in ASEAN countries?
Okay, thank you, Patricia. You put me on the spot because I have a lot of points that I would like to share. Okay, let me share in a very brief way. When we talk about the support from the government and how then we can leverage, one thing that I would like to start is definitely we need to really fully understand and realize the meaningful youth engagement. So the power that the youth has, and also the contribution that we can offer to the table in terms of policy making and also program implementations and other stages, other levels of policy and also the program, which is very important. Because it's not only the government not fully realize and understand, but sometimes even we as the young people and youth organizations, sometimes we don't really fully understand and realize our power. So that's something that I usually face with our colleagues as well. So it is important for example, like at YO, we really need to make sure that to raise awareness about the meaningful youth engagement, not only for other stakeholders, but also for our fellow young leaders and youth organization. Next would be a whole of government approach should need to be prioritized, meaning that it should be integrated, holistic, and joined by ministries. One of the challenges that usually face with AYO and our colleagues in Southeast Asia, and some also in African continents, because we have our counterparts there. Sometimes when we talk about global level toolkit, they don't really understand how to localize it. Even though maybe the government itself, they already point out some of the ministries. When we reach out to the ministry that we mentioned by the authorities, sometimes they redirect us to another ministries. They mention that, oh, that's not our part. Maybe you can reach out to another ministries. And we already reach out to the B ministry, and they also mentioned, oh, I think they would more in line with the Ministry of A. So it's like a back and forth, and we are faced with the bureaucratic challenges as well, which I think is still facing right now. So I think a whole government approach, it is very important. It is very something that we need to highlight as well. And when we talk about meaningful youth engagement, it is important for us to understand that youth can be consultant, youth need to be contributed, youth is equal partners, and we can also be the leaders. I think those levels of meaningful youth engagement should be disseminated as well with, perhaps we can have another discussion with that in the interest of the time. And speaking of the approach, if I may add, we identify at least two approaches that we can do. One would be the approach one is co-shape and co-deliver institutional initiatives, meaning that the institution works with young people. The second approach is enable youth initiatives, meaning that the institution works for young people. They are the beneficiaries. And Do I have more time to share?
Sorry.
Oh, okay then.
I'm sorry, but we can take it back after the break.
Sure,
and during
definitely.
the parallel sessions. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Marilet, now back to you. The public sector workforce is aging in many countries, posing questions on long-term sustainability and the risk of loss of institutional knowledge. Young talent can also bring new skills and fresh perspectives. What have you found to be the key strategies and lessons learned to attract, develop, and retain young talent in the public sector? Briefly, please.
Very briefly, I try to. Well, first of all, young people get old too, so we have to find a way in order to continue to renew it. And I agree fully with you. Young people's voices have to be heard. They have to be heard not only once, but they have to be heard continuously. In aging societies, it's difficult because there are so many other pressing matters. I agree also with what you said about a one-stop shop sometimes in government. That is a one solution. So trying to find a way to make sure that you don't lose half of the time and energy before your voice is heard to find the right door to go into. So that's one thing. I've been taking a lot of notes here, and I'm pretty sure that many of my fellow policymakers online will do the same. Because as we said, the toolkit is one element with a lot of good examples, but we need to continue to improve it and make it better. In the Netherlands, what we do, for example, how we keep young people's voices heard is through our national youth strategy. We're currently developing it. It is a process of many years. It is currently in the hands of the young society, so that's maybe different from what most countries do. We have asked our young youth councils to come with a plan for us, of course with help of policymakers, to give us ideas on how we can include young people and have their voices heard in our policy making of government. And for us, young people are between the age of 12 and 29, so it's quite a large group. But that means also that it's about 3 million people 3.7 million people to be exact, out of 18 million in total in our country. So it is a very significant proportion of society. And what I would like to finish off with is, apart from what we're doing in government, you can all read it in the internet, because we have a lot of beautiful websites, and with Google Translate you can translate them into whatever language works for you best. But what I would like to finish with is that you have to realize your power. It was also said here before, but you have a voice, so use it. And yes, please don't be disencouraged if it wasn't heard the first time, but continue to use it, because also people like us in government, we do listen, and we do try to make a policy that works for everybody, especially young people in society.
Thank you, Marilet. It was great. Thank you for your contribution. Ms. Eliassen, OECD data for Norway and many other OECD countries show that mental ill health is a growing challenge for young people, with negative effects on their education and employment outcomes. Norway has been exploring ways to better support them. Can you share some lessons with us?
Thank you for this important and challenging question. My answer is too long, so I will shorten it down. But if you have some question afterwards, please come to me and I will elaborate. OECD data for Norway and many other countries shows that mental ill health is a growing challenge for young people, with serious consequences for education and employment. This complex problem requires coordinated, simultaneous and individual tailored efforts from multiple services to enable young people to complete their education and enter workforce. Norway is probably struggling as much as other countries in trying to do this, but we know something about what we want to achieve and what is needed to get results. And then we just have to do it. It's not as simple as that. To improve services for individuals with health challenges, including young people with mental health issues, we are working to facilitate Better integration of mental health services with education and labor market services to ensure comprehensive support for young people. Early identification and intervention, including programs aimed at detecting mental health problems at an early stage, especially in schools. Support during transition phases. The transition from schools to work is a critical period. Developing measures to support young people during this transition, including guidance and training tailored to their needs. These measures are part of the government's broader strategy to create a more inclusive labour market and ensure that more young people have the opportunity to contribute and benefit from working life. In our efforts to break down barriers between different sectors and services, we have identified obstacles that hinder a holistic, coordinated and simultaneous service offer. These barriers include different purposes of the services, different funding, different professional perspectives and approach to a problem, different regulation, different organization and management systems, limitation in informal exchange due to privacy regulation to protect the individual's right to their own data. We are therefore working to dismantle these barriers through national, regular and local collaborative initiatives. Sufficient time for close follow-up is a crucial factor in facilitating a comprehensive service offer, including time for dialogue with the young person and time to collaborate with various service providers. Initiatives such as the Youth Guarantee, which ensure close follow-up for young people and offer follow-up measures within the Norwegian PES, such as individual placement support, are important tools.
Thank you so much, Ms. Eliassen.
I have three more sentences,
Okay.
and then I'm done. The white paper on labour market policy, which we just presented this autumn, gives a lot of suggestions on initiatives that should be put forward to improve the labour market situation for young people, and also a lot of initiatives targeted at young people with mental health issues. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Then, let's end this panel with a positive note. You have successfully participated in world skills competitions, in which you have been able to demonstrate your professional skills and expertise. What did you gain through that experience? And what could other young people learn from it in a very brief way, please?
So, I don't think you need to know or even be part of world skills to understand my advice. The world we live in today is very different to where it was for our grandparents or even our parents. Gen Z is often described as the kids on their phones, you know, they're always like this. And that's true. We have Google Translate, so we can read anything that's written, and we can get any piece of information we want whenever we need it. And with that power, and that power of connectivity that we have, I think it's very important we use it to learn about culture. Gen Z are not just kids, they're global citizens. They will be the first generation to fully understand, have the opportunity to fully understand every culture. And you won't be able to do it. But whenever you have the opportunity to, it is very important that you learn about every culture you meet. If a new person joins your school from a different country, ask them about their traditions, about their language, about what's important to them. In school, you can get multiple correct answers to the same question. And just because you grew up in Porto or I grew up in Liverpool does not mean the way that I think is the only correct way to think, or even the correct way at all. So I deeply encourage you to think about how you learn about each other. I'm British, I'm in Portugal, and everybody is speaking English. That is a very privileged position to be in. And the moment I understood that was the moment where I really started embracing other countries' traditions and trying to learn about them and why they are that way. And once you do that, you will become a more well-rounded person, and you can apply that to your careers, where your colleagues are often from different parts of the world, and you will see stronger career growth, you'll be a happier person, and you'll experience the world. In 1,000 years' time, I hope the world has no borders and we are just considered Earth. So which right answers are we going to take from each country to represent our society as a human race? And what's important to you? So next time you meet someone from a different country, try and find out a little bit more about them and their culture.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you to the whole panel for your valuable contributions and interventions. That concludes the opening session. I would like to thank all the speakers for their insightful and inspiring interventions, as well as to all participants who join us online and also the participants in-house. I believe we will all be taking home a lot of food for thought today. The parallel sessions will start at midday. In room 1, we will be discussing youth labor market outcomes and entrepreneurship, while in room 2, we will be discussing young people's trust in government and relationship with public institutions. We invite everyone who is with us to a coffee break, which I also need, that is being served in the lobby before the start of the parallel sessions. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada.
Thank you.
Podes ver o sol, mas se não o sentires, nunca saberás que é energia. Podes proteger-te do vento, mas se não deixares que te leve, nunca saberás que é liberdade. Podes fugir da chuva, mas se não te molhares, nunca saberás que é motivação. Podes contar as estrelas, mas se não as seguires, nunca saberás que são oportunidades.
You tried to hold me down, so I became a soldier, built up all these walls, and now I'm climbing over those nasty bees are tempting me, oh Lord, but I ain't going back. You take me for a fool, it doesn't make me foolish. Told me I was wrong, passion made you ruthless, manipulate, it's just too late. Oh Lord, but I ain't going back no more. Fueling up the flames, gonna show you what I made of. Breaking every chain that you put on me. You thought I wouldn't change, but I grew on you. Cause I will never be what you wanted. This fire's keeping me alive, making me believe I couldn't do without you. Make it hard to leave, you think it's all about you. You know I'll never be what you wanted. This fire, I tried to get this weight off on my shoulders, built up on my strength, I'm finally taking over.
Não fiques na sombra, procura as respostas que precisas. Insiste naquilo que te faz feliz. Encontra formas de superar os obstáculos. Valoriza todas as possibilidades. Entende a realidade e transforma na tua realidade. Dá-lhe sentido. Partilha-a com convicção, com paixão. Descobre-te, completa-te, modifica-te, as vezes que forem necessárias. Alimenta a tua energia, encontra a motivação, dá uso à liberdade e agarra todas as oportunidades. Instituto Português do Desporto e Juventude. A tua escolha, a nossa missão. Sabe mais em ipdj.gov.pt.